Anyway, so I wanted to talk about um, these things that I've been working on. I talked about it earlier, the idea that Christ is a conscious program, which is it's not it's nothing new, you know, it's nothing new. But I realized that there's something missing, right? In that when it comes to evil, we don't actually, right? We don't understand what evil is. And there was this woman I saw yesterday, today, preaching, right? Preaching with from everything in their hearts, believing that there's going to be a savior coming to save the world and everything. You understand? And I realized that when it comes to evil, it is something that is misunderstood. And as a result, it gets to be tagged. We give evil a bad rep, bad reputation. Because, well, in language, right, there's something called connotation and denotation. This has to do with, um, if you are here with me, then get ready to hear all my bullshit, but you will learn something. Or, you know, in in etymology, etymology is the study of word, words, the root of where the word came from, and in so when you study words, you are not if you are not finding like sometimes there's something called sometimes you have a word, right? It means this, but when you do etymology on it, you find out that it actually meant this before we started associating this to the word. And so it's like one is one is um one is connotation, right? What we have started associating to the word connotation. And then another is denotation, what the word really means before it changed. And so with time, like certain words a long time ago meant something else. Like when the word itself was coined, it meant something else. In the word originally meant something else. But I'm saying all this to bring to the word to evil. The word meant something else. But when with time, right, between when it was coined and the new association of what it means, in between that space, you are having what we call a lot of history taking place, a lot of political movement, a whole lot. Just, well, one word, right, transforming took a lot of fight, political, a lot of perspectives, right? So what we have is the word itself is the denotation, right? The denotation of that word, what it meant originally, right? What it denotes when you say something, right? The dictionary, not the dictionary, the word itself denotes something. Originally, it was meant to mean this. You understand? But space and time, history and politics and religion and perspective and everything else, ethics and whatever, we have the word meaning something else called connotation. Sometimes some words they do stay the same too, like till now they are still the same, right? You know. Anyway, so this woman that is speaking, pouring her heart out, preaching about a savior complex coming, got me thinking about what's her level of intellect. You understand? What is her level of intellect for intellect, right? What is her level of intellect? Because her belief is the only thing that is guiding her. She is being guided by her belief. You understand? She has so much belief, or belief or believe. She has so much belief in some doctrine, right? And that doctrine has become her faith. You understand? That her faith now is that there's going to be a savior coming to save her and everybody else. You know, that's the faith that has been brought onto her. Well, let's not, I don't even want to go into that details, but her faith is that, based on her belief. You understand? So I'm saying that based on her belief, she's guided to have such a faith. But what's her level of intellect when she was being conditioned or being, when you say the word condition, it sounds very negative. Like, what do you mean she was being conditioned? But, well, euphemism, right? But it's like, what did I say? Why did I say euphemism? But I'm saying, instead of belief, instead of condition, right? She was introduced to a perspective. So now she has gained a perspective, right, which are shaping her faith. Now her faith is in God. You understand? It's in the belief. And I'm asking, like, okay, and the problem is in the faith, right? Because her faith, the problem is in the faith. The problem to me has been like, I'll let you see my angle, right? The problem to me is like, what's her level of intellect that she was using when she was being given the belief that she has, that has shaping her faith? What was her level of intellect? Because we want to get to where I really want us to get to, evil, because we need to dissect the idea of evil. But that's the thing. What was her level of intellect? So evil, right? What is evil? I'm sure, I know that if I ever ask her about evil, she's going to tell me things that has to and an image of what she thinks evil is, which is based on she hasn't necessarily seen evil, but she has, imagined evil based on her beliefs. She hasn't seen evil, she has imagined evil based on her belief. Whereas what is truly evil, right, she might be missing it. She's not even. So that's the thing about connotation and denotation, because if we are able to colonize the way you see things, we have been able to colonize your mind. So, well, if you say, well, I mean, I hope you get my point, right? I'm still a student of this life. So, what I'm trying to really push is that there are certain things that are very sublime, right? They are so subtle, or they are, you don't catch it. You cannot catch those things when it's, you have to like almost like bring so much of different, in order to be able to see the underlying image of what is being said, you know. So anyway, I'll, having forgotten this train of thought. We are working, right? We are working. This thing about denotation and connotation, right? I'm saying that once the language, right, whatever the different words meant, when they have been changed, right, it becomes connotation. And you can also colonize people based on connotations, because I'll get back to all of what I'm saying, don't trust me. Because listen, there is something about, let me see if I can. There is a feeling that sometimes if you don't have a word for it, you're not even able to have a way to talk about it. You understand? And when somebody tells you that, say I know how it feels to love, right? And then someone says to me that, well, what love is really about this. It's not about like my internal explicit feeling will be subjugated, right? It doesn't, that's not what love is, or that's not what it means. You understand? This is what it means. If somebody is really trying to play with my inner world, right? They might go about it with languages like gaslighting you, right? And changing the meaning of certain words that you have in order to control you. You understand? No, it doesn't mean this way. No, it doesn't mean that way. So I've seen a child who couldn't speak English very well, who couldn't also speak his local language very well. The parents, right? The parent sent this boy to school to go learn, but and then it's like the parent maybe also be speaking English, not a good English, right? These are African parent Ghanaians. I didn't meet the parent, but based on the conversation I had with the little kid, I know there's so much of things that this kid would want to express, but his language, right, it's almost like he's been brutalized by the world in such a way that how he could express himself, or has been taken away from this child. This child is fighting with language, speaking. Doesn't much. There's a lot of. He cannot speak the English well in order to express himself. He couldn't also speak the local language or to express himself. So I could see the struggle. Maybe I've been there before too. Maybe I'm still there, but that's a that's an injustice that has been done to that child. Right. I'm talking about things. So this example right here is sublime. Right. Is it? Or subtle? Because you don't see it. All that you might see is this kid trying to talk or trying to say this or say that, but you don't see the other side of who this kid is, what the kid is trying to express. You understand? Like it's so anyway, back away from the kid story. Connotations and denotations. Denotation is the original meaning of the word. Denotation, connotation happens after it has gone through all of the shit that time has allowed it to go through to evolve. So it becomes the connotation of the word. And some word they stay the same, right? Some word before whatever uh, it still means the same thing. Some don't. So and also we are speaking about languages, uh, if this algorithm work, maybe it might, because we are in this period where our country wants to start learning poem, introducing concepts, introducing languages, Chinese and Arabic language to Ghanaians. So probably this is the best time. But to let you know, talk about language and all of that. But listen, that's not even what I'm interested in. What I'm really trying to get at is that this woman, right, her her suffering, right. Listen, there's something about this woman. Okay, this woman, this woman, right, her suffering, right. What has been done to her humanity? Nobody knows, right? Nobody knows what has been done to her humanity. And I'm saying that, and I'm speaking for everyone as well. Nobody knows what has been done to our humanity. You understand? Like, personally, I don't know what you've gone through. And personally, you don't know what I've gone through. So, when it comes to how now I'm getting, I'm crashing, but let me not crash. This woman, right? Whatever she understands as evil is given to her by the book that she is being guided by. As to whether she knows so much about what the book is saying, you might say, well, you have to take, maybe she doesn't have the license to talk about this. No, it's not even about that. It's her level of being able to think about what was given to her before she accepted it. Her intellectual level, right? Her intellect before she accepted it will affect how she is processing what she's reading, and then affect how her fate is going to be like. You understand? If her intellect, right, is going to be the one responsible for processing the belief that is given to her. You understand? And so, whatever level that her intellect is at will determine the kind of belief she will be having. And that kind of belief will affect her fate. So if I ask her, what is evil? Right? What is evil? Right? What is evil? Because really, all of this is centered around the evil. That's what I really want us to talk about. If I ask her, what is evil? She would give me, say I do justice to her and say, well, she will give me one of the best definitions of evil based on her level of intellect, interacting with the book called the Bible. Right? Ghanaians, right? We on a listen. If you anybody you ask in this country, maybe Africa, you ask the person what is evil, what is good and evil, right? You will get a picture, and this picture is based on their intellect, interacting with whatever material that has that professes to contain the definition of evil, right? Her response to me will be based on her level of intellect and whatever material her intellect has been interacting with, that this material is professing that it knows what evil is. You understand? So me asking her what is evil, she's going to the response I will be getting is her intellect and the result of her intellect interacting with that book that professes evil. So what is the quality of such information? You understand? What is the quality of such information? The answer is that most people will say evil is the devil, right? Evil is the devil. Good is God. And it ends there. Evil is the devil. Good is God. That's where it ends. That's the level of interaction they have with the Bible or the Quran or any other religious book. The response you will get is evil is the devil, good is God. And that's where it ends at. So, I take that response, right? I take that response. That's a general respond, right? Or response, right? That's the general response that I will get from people. Evil is the devil, good is God. Or evil is Satan, good is God. That's the response I will get from people. So that response, right? The question is like, is it true? Is it true? Okay, so evil, right? Evil, let me say, good and evil, right? Good and evil. Good and evil. If we are not dealing with a religious perspective of good and evil, which is that good is God, evil is the devil or Satan. If we are not dealing with the religious perspective of these two things, what you are looking at when we talk about good and evil on an intellectual level, you know, is that good, right? Good. You know, it's like we always say God is good. We say evil is the devil, evil is Satan. And the the two polarities, right? I call it the two polarities, but the two of them, or the two dualities, two faces of the same thing. We'll get to that. The two dualities, right? You know, it's not a religious perspective. This we are doing intellectual thing. Good and evil is not religious. It has a religious spin on it, but a religious spin. You know, the devil is the horn, and God is the light, whatever. But I'm saying, like, on an intellectual level, good and evil, right? Before connotation of it, before it was connoted into the devil with the horns, you know, God as the good guy. Before the connotation of it, based on religious perspective, before its connotation, you know, what was it? What was what was good? What was evil before connotation? You understand? And so to deal with such thing, you know, to deal with, okay, so the religion has brought us this far. While bringing us this far, it has evolved certain words, certain ideas, right? And so if religion is the face, is a connotation of perspectives, right? Let me not lose you on that. Religion, right, has had its own ability to evolve the words that we use today. But those words, right, good and evil, has meant something on an intellectual level that religion understands it based on a personal level, a personality like the devil, Satan, and God, the you know, the being that will come and save humanity, or save Christ, save humanity. So the devil and God, that's a that's new in new on the timeline. When I mean timeline, I mean historically, religiously speaking, like historically, right? The historical timeline when religion came into being, what what was good and what was evil was understood differently, just like how the child could have expressed himself, or yes, could have expressed himself, but based on whatever this country has become, has produced the injustice that this child is not able to express himself. Whatever we understood as good and evil, right, has been just like what this country has done to the child. What we were speaking about when we were talking about what you are calling good and evil may be, now I'm putting may be, so don't get comfortable with the word may be, but what we were talking about when we were talking about good and what we were talking about that now has been understood as good and evil. This is the connotation, right? And this, I'm speaking from an intellectual level, not a religious perspective. That's why I've introduced connotations and denotations. So I'm saying that what the feeling was back then, that has been evolved into good and evil. Now I'm not saying I'm not saying it's a feeling. Don't bastardize what I'm trying to tell you. That's why I'm saying the subtle nature on what we are speaking about, right? The sublime in this conversation. What we thought about originally as love, and what the world or religion, has said it's supposed to mean. That's what I'm speaking about. So we are on the other side of this, like we are on this, we are in this perspective, right? We are in this global world. You understand? We are in this perspective, right? And this perspective has shifted every ideology, every concept. It has shifted the very fabric of reality. So when, like I said, what we were feeling back then, I'm saying feeling because I'm not, okay, what we were saying back then, that now we speak about good and evil as if it is something new, or it is something that was introduced by religious perspective. All I'm saying too is this: when you intellectually take the true concept of good and evil and you say, okay, these two are always together. They are together in the Bible. They are together in the Quran. They are together they're even together in like traditional systems, like they're always together. Good and evil, they're always together in every belief system that we have. Good and evil is always together. So, like a virus, it enters every belief system. Good and evil, it enters every belief system. This global world we live in, good and evil is in the fabric of every part of this global world. You get it? So this is not even an attack on religion. It's really about, so we're talking about evil, right? And how it's always with good. And how good is always with evil. And how we are in a and we be in a global world, which has shifted every perspective, every ideology, the reality, the fabric of reality itself. You know, and I'm telling you about connotations and denotations, about where's that shift based on the space between the timelines. In that middle space there's been war, conflict, ideological stance, a whole lot of things that has evolved away from what it meant to the connotation on it now. You understand? So when if I ask the woman what evil is, she will tell me it's about Satan. You know, when I ask what God is, she will tell me it's about some being somewhere who has power over Satan. You know, that's what I would get from her. So this woman, right? I'm saying when it comes to evil, right? She has a definition for evil. But I'm not saying she's wrong for having that definition. I'm saying that the evil she speaks about, right? If that was the evil that existed in this world would have been okay. So you see, her suffering, whatever she's going through, I call whatever her pain, her suffering, whatever she's going through, I call that her evil. I call that the evil. I call that evil. It's not the ideology she holds about. You see, what I'm speaking about is when I talk about evil, I'm talking about it as it has materialized itself in this world. I'm not speaking about evil like there is an entity somewhere who is evil that is making the world go evil. You know, I'm speaking about the very global world that we live in. What evil nature it is. Not some evil entity somewhere making this global world an evil nature. And so it's like Because the conversation for her will end at, well, evil is the devil. Evil is the devil. Meanwhile, right? Meanwhile, her life, whatever her life, what the world, this country, the world has imposed on her humanity, that doesn't register to her as evil. What registers to her as evil is an entity somewhere. An entity somewhere who is in the sky or who is around her. A personalized entity called Satan, who is making her life difficult, who is giving her the bullshit onto her humanity. So to express her pain, to express herself, she takes along this ideology that evil is some devil called Satan. You know, in this global world, evil is some devil called Satan who is orchestrating the world to bring about this thing that she's going through, this injustice to her humanity. Is one person called the devil who has orchestrated the world to make this happen for her. Which means that every layer of entities, people, systems, every political instrument, political ideology, so much of what is in front of her will go unnoticed. Someone's not to say she's blind, not to say that she is blind, but she sees evil, not in her current circumstance, as to what the world and the construction of this bullshit has become and made, imposed on her humanity. She rather deflect that to an entity. Well, if she had the language, if she had the intellectual level to process and given the right resources, I don't think she'll be speaking about evil like the way she's talking about evil. So, what is about evil? What is it about evil? Right. I say evil and good are in polarities, right? I mean, they are the dual faces of one thing, right? But this one really saying, like, before global world, this is this is something I want you to imagine. Before global war, just like the kid, before global war, what evil meant, right? What evil meant, right? What evil meant and what good meant, right? Mental, what they meant had to do with dualities. What do you mean? Like, what do you mean that? What do we mean that what evil really meant was dualities, and that it got usurped by a global world into, I mean, global world is the word for the word I can use. But what do you mean that evil and good was usurped by the global world? And yes, that's what I'm saying. Like, what we understood to be this thing that is being talked about as good and evil has been about dualities. It has been about night and day. It has been about it's not two principles, but it has been about, the best example I use is, it has been about yin and yang, you know. It has been about the expansion and contraction. It's always the duality in everything. There's always the duality in everything. You know, duality in everything. You know, but to have it get to a level where we speak about it in terms of it being one being an entity called Satan, one being an entity called the devil, God. Now I'm like, man, you guys are. That's where you lose me. That's where you lose me. Like, you know, I'm sure I've lost a lot of people so far in this conversation, but this is where you also lose me, because when we are talking about dualities, good and evil, when we are talking about yin and yang, when we are talking about contraction and expansion, we are speaking about principles, right? We are speaking about things that are part of the fabric of this universe. You know, we are talking about things that are part of the fabric of this universe. We are talking about things that back then, the thinking, like the fabric of this universe, who's going to speak English like that? But they know, they know, they know, you know, like, so this one here, this recording here is supposed to be an extended form of what I was talking about the last video. So Satan, right, has been on an abstract level, right? Satan, not the entity, the one you really think is there being someone called Satan. No, Satan has been about when some people get power and use it against other people. That is power that is used to subjugate. That is satanic. You understand? And God has been about when everybody has power. Because everybody has power, you know. But when people start playing their own little tricks to subjugate some people, and then put it in history that they are the supreme one, and then we buy into that, you know. It's all an illusion. And also, I'm speaking about Jesus Christ, Christos. I'm saying that, like, he never existed, or the ideology of Christ, the ideology of Christ, what you will call the consciousness of Christ, the individual himself didn't exist, but it was the ideology that when people talk about Christ, they are speaking about someone who existed, but it was about the consciousness that humanity should be tapping into, because that consciousness is saying that you are God. Anyway, I want to end here. Yeah, I want to end it here, and I don't know if I'll ever speak about religion again. Oh, but I won't speak about religion for a while until something crazy like people who are lying to people about, oh, fear mongering, introducing like, if you don't do this, you go to hell. If you do this, then you go to heaven. Like, you're dealing with polarities again. You're dealing with dualities again. So, yeah. You see that, a good teacher should just give you the framework. Then you can use the framework to expand on anything that, you know, you can, to see how that framework may evolve what you are, that thing. So now heaven and hell, I'm telling you, it's about dualities. You know, someone said heaven and hell is a state of the mind. Anyway, I hope we all come out of superstition and deal with these materials differently. I hope we are able to raise our intellectual level so that we can deal with the materials, we can interact with the materials differently. Peace, man. Or you, woman. Peace.